A Jewish boy was born in Russia in 1888 and emigrated to the United States with his family when he was 5 years old. His only memory of Russia was lying on the ground one night, watching his house burn down during a pogrom. In the US, the family lived in poverty, safety, and peace. He recalled as an adult that his mother would always say, "God bless America," with something like rapture. And in 1938, this grown-up immigrant boy, Irving Berlin, released the song, "God Bless America." Sung by Kate Smith, it swept the nation. There is no such thing as a work of art that is universally loved, and so naturally, there were those who didn't like the song. Supposedly, some objected to the fact that it was written by an immigrant and a Jew. Others didn't like the mention of God, or that it was asking God to bless only America and no other place. Some called it jingoistic. Woody Guthrie didn't like it either. He evidently found it unrealistic and complacent. In direct response, he wrote, "This land is your land." I'm a bit surprised that Guthrie was so irked by Berlin's song, and doubly surprised because his song is not all that different from the one that goaded him into writing it. Here's God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home sweet home. And here are the first two verses of This Land is Your Land. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Both songs show obvious love for America, highlighting its geography and the sense of belonging that both authors feel. Noticeable differences are that Berlin's song has a slower, more solemn pace, while Guthrie's is both livelier and more relaxed. Perhaps God Bless America suggests that the nation belongs to God, while This Land is Your Land places the nation squarely in the hands of its residents, especially with its fourth verse, which pokes at the idea of private property. Berlin's is simpler and more fervent. Guthrie's is more restless and sometimes challenging. But to my ear, they are far more alike than different. I see them both as patriotic songs. Today just happens to be Flag Day, which I was not even thinking about when I decided to write about patriotism. I was just thinking that this year is the 250th anniversary of our nation, and so the subject was on my mind. I do have my flag though, and I'm going to put it out on the mailbox post for the day today. In my attitude toward the American flag, I'm different from many people I know. My friends haven't tended to like the flag very much. Symbols are tricky that way. They can pack a powerful punch, but where and how they hit you depends on what you yourself understand the symbol to represent. No one can decide what the symbol should mean for you, and maybe even you can't decide what the symbol means for you. The same is true of words. In my research for this sermon, I spent a lot of time trying to understand what patriotism means to people. I discovered that there is little agreement about the definition of patriotism, its value, or its virtue. The dictionary says that the word patriot comes from the ancient Greek patriotes, which simply meant countryman, someone who lives in the same country as you. This word came from patris, meaning one's country, which in turn came from the word pater, meaning father. This root word has a dual role that can either be confusing or interesting. On the one hand, patriotism simply refers to affection for or pride in the land of one's forefathers. On the other hand, the word might suggest that we look upon the country itself as a parent. This analogy, state is to citizen as parent is to child, is thousands of years old. Socrates talks about it in the works of Plato. So let's consider this. In what ways is our country our parent? Well, metaphorically speaking, I would argue that our country gave birth to us. As our own parents did, our nation had a life before we even existed. That life produced the conditions under which we could be born and be nurtured. Almost all that I have, almost all that I am, was provided to me by my forebears, both my genetic ancestors and all Americans who built this country before I arrived here. And in the same way that a young child kind of worships her parents, I would also argue that being kind of amazed by the founding fathers of the United States of America is also appropriate. They did, in fact, do something extraordinary. They created a nation during a period when representative democracy was very rare. They used their considerable intelligence and knowledge to establish institutions that have endured for 2.5 centuries. The United States Constitution has been one of the most influential constitutional documents in modern history and has served as a model for many new democratic nations. I believe all this and more should be celebrated and appreciated. There comes a time, though, when you realize that your parents are human and faulty, that they perhaps have behaved shamefully. We all know that the founders of our country were far from perfect. We may blush to consider certain flaws in the conduct of our own parents and that of great Americans throughout history. For example, the choice of Thomas Jefferson to own slaves, even though he himself knew perfectly well that it was wrong. Learning about the flaws of our forebears can be very painful, whether we are the ones directly hurt by the flaws or not. I imagine that people all over the world know what it is like to feel indignation over the past or present wrongs of their country. Now, in my metaphor comparing a nation to a parent, I of course do not think that the nation is really like a human being. It has no brain, no heart, and no real capacity for moral reasoning. My purpose with this metaphor is to shine a light on the relationship that we humans feel with this very abstract thing, and also very real thing, which is our nation. I want to talk about our brains, our hearts, our morale. In a 2004 article called "Why I Am Not a Patriot," philosopher Carol Nicholson explained how she lost her love for the United States. At the time of the article, she was deeply upset by the war in Iraq. Nicholson wrote, "I continue to admire the ideals in the name of which America was founded, but since my country does not stand for them, I do not love my country." She said, "I will continue to vote, pay taxes, obey the law, and fulfill my responsibilities as a citizen, but as a rational person, I have neither the obligation nor the desire to love my country until such time as my country deserves it." Now, 20 years after she published those words, I believe there are many who share her feelings. I'm not sure I have ever felt exactly the way she felt, but I understand her feelings and what prompted them. I too was extremely upset by the war in Iraq and marched in protest. However, Nicholson also referred to patriotism as fanatical delusions. She said, "Fixing love on an abstraction such as country leads to the erroneous conclusion that one's country is better than all others, which is a recipe for intolerance, hate, and war." I can still understand her emotion, but with her reasoning, I could not disagree more. It is not true that love of country leads to chauvinism and hate. A perfect example is the song we just heard, This Is My Song, in which the lyricist perfectly expresses an almost sacred love for their own nation, while also sharing that patriotic sentiment with the people of all nations. I'm a little offended by her assertion, in fact. My love of this nation, my appreciation of its founders, and my affection for its flag are not fanatical delusions, and they don't make me hateful. I understand why people don't share my feelings, but they should not shame me for mine. I don't know to what extent any of you may consider yourself patriots or feel something like love for this country. Maybe you connect with the word, or maybe it gives you an icky feeling. If you are like many or even most people today, you may feel a deep sense of ambivalence about the state of our nation and distress for its health. I think that's appropriate. There is plenty to be worried about and angry about. However, as I define the word patriotism, love of or pride in one's country, it can easily coexist with ambivalence, worry, anger, and indignation. People can feel affection for their country as well as great frustration with its shortcomings. After all, criticism of democratic governments is essential for their proper function. Responsible citizens must criticize. But celebration and gratitude are also important. We know our parents are not perfect, but that's not what we think of usually when we go to their birthday party. We sing and we cheer. We think about what we inherited from them: genes, personality, talents, values, habits. I am similarly proud of American values: freedom of speech, equality under the law, the democratic process, and peaceful transition of power, to name a few. That these values have been applied imperfectly throughout our history does not make me love this nation any less. The fact is that I do not expect perfection from anybody. A child may worship his parents. A young person may be shocked to realize her parents have behaved shamefully. But mature adults know that we ourselves are far from perfect. Good citizens scrutinize their nation's history, but I believe it's a mistake to withhold appreciation because of the gap between ideal and reality. The founders did more than create a nation based on freedom, equality, and the inherent worth of every person. American ideals are great, but they could never have seen the light of day without our institutions. These were designed not around the assumption that leaders or voters will always be virtuous, but around the knowledge that human beings are flawed and always will be. That is the achievement of the founders, not the ideals alone, but the machinery created to pursue them. Through our national institutions, they provided us with the capacity for self-correction and improvement over time. Many major expansions of rights, such as universal suffrage, civil rights, and marriage equality, have come through these civic mechanisms. Nothing has made me appreciate the United States of America more than my work with immigrants and refugees. I took a couple of my students on a trip last year. We visited a bird sanctuary and hiked down to the river. One of my students got in the shallow water, and another sat beside me, telling me about his life in his home country. It was all in Spanish, and I only understood about half of it. But then he said in English, "This is first time that I enjoy a river." I asked, "This is the first river in Vermont that you visited?" He said, "No, the first river." All the rivers where he came from were full of trash, he said, and the woods behind them were full of armed drug cartels. You know, I always thought that parts of my childhood were rough. I'm going to start crying again. In that moment, I understood that, in fact, I grew up steeped in beauty, peace, and plenty. My students have all manner of stress and uncertainty in their lives right now, but they are still so grateful and happy to be here. I'm grateful too. Gratitude can be spontaneous, of course, but it is also a practice. It's good for body and mind. It relieves stress. It brings calm, clarity, and fortitude. In connecting with the good of our past and present nation, we make room for optimism in the face of our own human imperfection. There's a sense of momentum as we carry forward the gifts that were given to us by imperfect people. We can choose to see these gifts as tainted and thus believe that celebrating them is inappropriate. Or we can see them as immensely valuable, despite their flawed provenance. It may sound like I'm trying to defend Thomas Jefferson or the other founders, but they aren't the ones I care about. It's the state of the American spirit that concerns me. Dissent is essential to democracy, but gratitude and celebration are essential to the human spirit, individually and collectively. To slightly alter a quote, connection to the past is not the worship of ashes, it's the preservation of fire. America is not done. Our nation was created, and we are still creating it. Every time we vote, every time we argue about politics, every time we write or call our elected officials. We create America in apolitical ways too, in the way we treat our compatriots out in the world, in our neighborhoods, and in our homes. In every possible way, our collective actions shape this nation. Thus, in the same way that we could say that our nation gave birth to us, we could also say that we are giving birth to it. America is not just our parent, it is our child. The philosopher I quoted earlier, Carol Nicholson, said that love of country is not necessary in order for people to participate in community and work for common goals. And I think that's true. But I also think it's natural that for many people, their efforts on the nation's behalf will produce a certain affection for it. I believe we tend to love what we are responsible for. I think back to the years that I was a teacher of children. I can tell you that some of them showed extraordinarily challenging behaviors. My only way of meeting those challenges was by loving those particular students with single-minded devotion. I am proud to say that I had great success with some of these kids. There would have been no way for me to guide them if I had despised them or failed to meet them where they were or refused to notice their successes. I am thinking here of Mr. Rogers. He told children, "I like you just the way you are." That's radical. Mr. Rogers knew that children were not perfect. He knew they could be destructive, fearful, cruel, and chaotic. But he truly loved them as they were, and in doing so, he did more for their development than anyone else on television. Most importantly to me, he brought peace to children in his fanatically disciplined and quiet way. I could never possess the wisdom of Mr. Rogers, but I would love to emulate him in my attitude towards the world around me. If the United States is my child of sorts, how should I treat it? I would like to do so with celebration, protection, and encouragement, and to lead by example to the best of my ability. I would like to return for a moment to the songs that I mentioned at the beginning, God Bless America and This Land Is Your Land. It seems to me, if there is someone trying to celebrate something, there will always be someone else who says, "You're doing it wrong." Indeed, although Woody Guthrie wrote his song almost as a rebuke to Irving Berlin, he himself was similarly rebuked by others, almost from the start. Recently, historian Nick Estes said the song, "This Land Is Your Land," celebrates stolen land and indigenous genocide, and there are many who agree with him. And so finally, after comparing my nation to a parent and to a child, the metaphor that holds most value for me is nation as sibling, or rather, it's over 300 million citizens as my brothers and sisters, with all the bickering that entails. A quick story. 10 years ago, there was a major rift in my city between those that wanted to welcome Syrian refugees and those that didn't. It occupied the minds of just about everyone in town for a year at least. One hot summer evening, I attended a meeting at City Hall in order to share my thoughts on the subject. The place was packed, and dozens of people spoke, 2 minutes each, including me. Because the air conditioner would have made it impossible to hear, it was shut off. I sat on the floor because there was nowhere else to sit. Maybe the air was a little better down there, too. I listened to hours of testimony, for and against. Everyone was very, very passionate. I will never forget that day. The sweltering room had scores of upset people, all squashed together. But I was filled with a deep contentment and pride. I had such appreciation for the democratic process and for the opportunity to hear and be heard. I felt love for everyone there, friends and opponents alike. We were embodying peace, wrangling hot conflict verbally in a place of remarkable physical calm, trying to convince the city council to do whatever it was each of us wanted them to do. That's what America means to me, more than its history, more than its geography, and even more than its political process. It means the people, our sisters and brothers and cousins, in all their great, maddening, glorious, messy variety. When I was elected to city council the following year, I surprised myself by getting very comfortable reciting the Pledge of Allegiance before every city council meeting. What that ritual did for me was to remind me that all of us on the council, no matter how we may have been feeling about one another 60 seconds before, were in this thing together, doing our best for our city in the best way we knew how. To me, patriotism should be a unifying attitude, and the American flag a unifying symbol, representing everything we share, whether by birth or by fortune. We have our beautiful land, we have our laws, and we have each other. As I was researching for this sermon, I read a lot about what people think of the American flag. A surprising number of people said that they don't like it because it makes them think of those big, noisy pickup trucks that fly the flag as they go down the road, spewing toxic exhaust. I get that. Recently, my next-door neighbor bought a new extra loud muffler for his pickup. I was outside working in the garden when he started up his truck, and I was very bothered, to say the least, about the noise. I really hate noise, especially when I'm gardening. But the heart does not flourish in a state of resentment. And in that moment, I decided to try a new thought. I imagine that my neighbor likes his muffler because he's proud of his truck and he wants to celebrate it. And noise is his preferred form of celebration. So I decided to celebrate with him. Since then, every time I hear that noise, I celebrate my neighbor who is happy about his truck. And I am much happier as a result. The online magazine Psychology Today had this to say about celebration. Any celebration, big or small, is really about taking a beat to notice the good stuff in your life. It can also be a reminder of our talents and abilities, skills, and persistence. Drawing on those things can motivate us to keep working toward our goals. Lovers of democracy have big goals. Our forefathers created a nation in which the seeds of freedom and justice for all could be planted, take root, and flourish. But we do not sit here and expect that that flourishing can take place without a lot of work from us. In this work, speaking just for myself, I need all the love, pride, and gratitude I can get. I was in kindergarten in the year building up to the bicentennial. I was so ready to celebrate. But in July of 1976, I was stuck on a hippie commune with nary a flag in sight. No fireworks, no parades, no three-cornered hats. I felt cheated. This year, coming up to our semi-quincentennial, things will be different. I'm going to one celebration on July 3rd and another on the 4th. Maybe I'll wear red, white, and blue. I'm going to celebrate people in their noisy trucks and people in their electric cars, people flying the flag right side up or upside down or not at all. I intend to treat it as an extra-large family reunion, not one that descends into bickering, but one elevated by forbearance and fellow feeling, if just for one day. That is my hope, and I'm optimistic. I finish with a quotation from Mr. Fred Rogers. How great it is when we come to know that times of disappointment can be followed by joy, that guilt over falling short of our ideals can be replaced by pride in doing all that we can, and that anger can be channeled into creative achievements and into dreams that we can make come true.